to my neighborhood. See, I was born 3 blocks from here, 1938, April 8th, 1938. And I lived the first 18 years of my life on Warren Avenue between Hastings and Rivard. Hastings was a very popular street. There's a lot of culture there on Hastings Street. And my dad died in 1940. And I was adopted, basically adopted by the family that lived upstairs over me, the Williams family. And Mrs. Williams' son, Andrew, was a musician. He played the trumpet. And he implanted and instilled in me the desire and love for music that just totally consumed me and fed my life. But I remember sitting in his mother's kitchen, drinking milk and eating home-baked cookies as Andrew would play the muted trumpet in his bedroom. And I remember the time when he called me in the bedroom and he opened up this case. And I must have been 3, 4 years old. And I saw this golden thing. I had no idea what it was. I'd never seen a trumpet before. That's what it was. And he picked the trumpet up and he blew. And the note kind of astounded me. Like I said, I'd never seen anything like this. But it instilled in me and planted the seed and the love for music that totally consumed and fed my desires eventually to get involved musically. And further down, like 3 doors from me, again on Warren Avenue, lived another musician, a fellow named Will Davis. Will was a jazz pianist who went on to play professionally, and if you look into the history of jazz in Detroit, Will's name is prominent there. And then Will was the first person that I played an instrument. I say I played the instrument. Really what it was Will called me up, set me on the bench there by him, and he told me to mash on that key. And I mashed it, and the piano made the sound that pianos make, which was astounding to me. Then he took my hands, and he went along the keyboard, and he started playing the keys, which was the first time that I said I played a piano. And but Will also, again, was an extended member of my family, as was Will and other members on that block, other people on that block. But the fellow that really had a profound impact in my life musically was a fellow named Oliver Green. Mr. Green sang with the gospel group called the Detroiters, a very popular group here in Detroit during the 40s and 50s. And my friends and I would sit on his porch and listen to he and his group rehearsing and singing. And my friends and I, we would say, hey, well, this is what we're going to do, man. We're going to sing. We didn't need no instrument. Our voices would do what the instrument was doing. Plus the girls liked the singers. All the little girls, when they saw Mr. Green walking down the street, they'd run behind him and wave, and we said, yep, that's it. So we began doo-wopping. This is what we were doing during the 40s, during the 50s, doo-wopping. So we started singing around the recreation centers and things around the city of Detroit. And by 1952, we'd gotten good enough to compete in the talent shows that was held throughout the city. And one of the most prominent shows that had talent shows was the Warfield Theater, which was, again, just blocks from here. It was on Hastings Street. And we sang there, and it was 1952, December of 1952, when we had our biggest achievements as the doo-woppers. We sang in this contest, and one of the groups that we sang against was Irma Franklin's group. Irma was a little cute girl. Her dad was Reverend C.L. Franklin, and her little sister was Aretha. Very prominent family. Maybe you heard of them. So as it was, the contest was held that night, and one of the pluses and rewards to that, the winners of that contest would have an opportunity to sing on the radio for a Christmas concert. The WGLB radio station was sponsoring, and Bristol Bryant was the disc jockey at that time. So we sang, as did Irma's group, and when it was over with MC, I think it was Bill Murray, whom we called Winehead Willie. He was the MC. So he said that it was a tie, and he was going to take it to the audience to determine the winners. And he put his hand over Irma's group, and they roared, they clapped, And he held it over our head, and the roof came off the theater. I mean, our friends had loaded up. This was my neighborhood. This is where we all were. Anyway, as it was, so Irma and her group stormed off stage. They said, we didn't want second place prize. Give it to them guys. We said, we want that one too. But as it was, we went on and we did perform, and our friends told us how well we sang because there was no taping at that time, so we never heard ourselves sing. And I continued singing in the Doo-wop group until I graduated junior high school, and that would have been basically the last time that I'd sung until 1957. I joined the service in 1957. I was stationed in Madison, Wisconsin at University of Wisconsin. It was right down the street from our base. And I met a fellow named Clifton Richardson. Cliff was from San Antonio, Texas. His dad was a minister. And so he was a clerk, as I was. We were both clerks there on the base. And we became roommates and became inseparable. We became brothers, doo-woppers. This is what he and I did. Cliff and I, we sang everywhere. They used to call us Tweedledee and Tweedledum. This is what we wanted to do. We wanted to sing. And we did that. Eventually, we met a fellow named John Middleton. John was a cook down the base. We invited him to come sing with us, which he did, and we trioed for a little while. But in 1958 was when we aligned ourselves with a fellow named Charles Capawa. Capawa was from Hawaii, and he was also a clerk that worked up there with Rich and I. And he told me, as I processed him on the bass, he told me that he sang and he could play the piano. We said, hey, man, he's Hawaiian, let's see what he can do. And sure enough, he was dynamite. I mean, he was a pianist, a great arranger. And so we became a quartet, became the Versatiles. And by 1959, we were singing on the bass in Madison, Wisconsin, the University of Wisconsin. We got very good. And we participated in Tops and Blues, which was like American Idol is now. That was the top talent show in the Air Force. We won and at our level and then at the next level. And the semifinals were to be held at the Selfridge Air Force Base in Mount Clemens, which was great for me, which meant that I would be coming home, obviously. And we came to Selfridge. And the first day there at Selfridge, we had orientation. All the contestants had to come and meet. And I went there and we saw this group. We'd heard of this group. They were the Air Force's answer to the Platters. It was 3 guys and 1 girl, cute girl. A girl named Evelyn Clark, and Evelyn and I were immediately attracted to one another. And we did develop a great relationship. But as it was, the contest was held, and yep, they won. So the organizers said, well, rather than send these guys back, because we really were dynamite singers, they took us on to the finals, which were being held in Cheyenne, Wyoming. And which was great about that because, again, the first day, they just allowed the contestants to go do what they wanted to do, some went to town. So Evelyn and I got a chance to really hook up. And we spent the day, rode horses, laid in the grass. We just spent that day falling in love. We spent a whole year that day together. Evelyn, it was my first love affair. Obviously, I was only like 20 years old or such. So Evelyn and I, we just really, like I say, fell in love. And when the contest was held, we went there and we performed before the judges. And one of the judges was Elmer Bernstein. And he was a very popular songwriter, producer for Paramount Studios there in Hollywood. And we impressed him. After the contest, he had us to meet with him, and he told us that he liked what we did, and he wanted us to get with him after we were discharged. Well, we all were due to be discharged in 1960, within months of one another. So he gave his business card to Capawa, and we said, great. He said, stay in touch. So we left Cheyenne, Wyoming on cloud 9, and I was on cloud 9.5 because I had Evelyn. So, but our pleasures and our happiness was short-lived because it wasn't long after that before, I think it was 2 months after that, John Middleton was the first to be discharged. And he went home to Los Angeles, where he was from, and he was killed in an automobile accident there. And we were crushed. I mean, we used to call John Little Baby. He was bigger than, taller than us. He was younger than us. So we called him Little Boy. But we lost Little Boy, and our grieving for John didn't last too long because it wasn't long after that before Cliff was involved in an accident there near our base in Wisconsin, and he sustained life-threatening injuries, and he was sent home to San Antonio to recuperate prior to him being discharged. And so I was deeply grieving because of the loss of Cliff. He and I was so close, He like I said, he was really my truest friend in the Air Force at that time. And again, it wasn't long after that before Kapawa was unceremoniously discharged. He, along with another Hawaiian, were caught naked in a vehicle there on the base. So they were given dishonorable discharges. And it left me to mourn and grieve by myself. And my grief continued immensely because I had a cyst on the base of my spine, which required hospitalization and eventual operation. Well, they couldn't perform it on my base in Wisconsin. I was sent to a base in Illinois. I knew no one there, and after the operation, I was bedridden. I couldn't move because I had to lay on my stomach. I was on a clear liquid diet, clear bouillon soup, Jello, and ginger ale, 3 meals a day. That's all I could eat for a whole month. So by that second week, it didn't matter. I didn't care if lightning struck me, if I got hit by a train, it didn't matter. I was in deep depression and mourning the fact that I lost my brothers in the manner that I had. So what could help me out of this funk? Nothing, But to my surprise, I was laying there one day after the second week of laying there on my stomach in this deep dungeon of despair. I heard someone walking down in the area where the beds were located, and it sounded someone in high heels or someone with a cane. And I heard this sound, and I still didn't react because, again, I was very hostile. I didn't want anyone talking to me. I didn't want them. All they wanted to do is give me that lousy stuff I had to eat and leave me alone. But I heard the walking and came, and then I heard the nurse say, "He's over there." And then the walking resumed, and it sounded as though it was getting close to my bed. And then it stopped, and I could tell that whomever was there near me, and someone touched my pillow, and I raised up, and it was Evelyn. Evelyn. I came back to life. I came back to life. I had never been as depressed as I was, nor have I ever been as happy as I was at that moment. And Evelyn, she bent down, and the tears and the laughter was intermingled, and the smiles, because she knew what I experienced, because she also knew the fellas that I was singing with. And sure enough, Evelyn and I, they allowed Evelyn to stay there. They brought a chair there, and they allowed her to stay overnight because she was in the service also. And, we laid there. She sat there and had her head on the pillow, and I just looked in her eyes and fell deeper and deeper in love with Evelyn. And that continued on, and then eventually she left that next day, and I continued recuperating and was eventually sent to my base. And she and I continued communicating, and then I was eventually discharged. And at that time, Evelyn was still, she wasn't no longer at Selfridge. She was on temporary duty somewhere else. And when I came back to Detroit, we was communicating by mail. And then I started working in the post office. I got a job as a mailman. And Evelyn had came back, and we resumed our relationship, but her tour duty was about winding down, so she wanted to know what were we going to do. She had a brother, and I think she was an orphanage, so she was just she and her brother, and her brother was in and out of the city, and she really didn't want to stay here in Detroit. She wanted to go to California, as many people did during the 60s. And then she asked me if we were going to get married, and I told her no. I wasn't but 22. I said, no, I'm really too young. Let's wait a little long, Evelyn. And she said, well, she wanted to go to California, so she reenlisted and was reassigned to a base out in California. And again, we maintained contact, and it was about 6, 7 months before I saw Evelyn again. And she came back and asked again if we were going to get married or should she move on. And I told her, I said, well, maybe you should move on because I didn't want to move out to California. And like I said, I was just getting familiar there at the post office. So she did. She re-enlisted and got a couple more letters from Evelyn, but I never saw Evelyn again after that. But when I joined the post office, started working at the post office, I was reunited with a fellow that I had played in my high school band with, a fellow named Freddie Gorman. Freddie was a singer and a writer at the Hitsville Records, which Barry Gordy had just started, which right around the corner here on St. Edwine is where Motown really began. And so Freddie pulled me into his Motown family. He was writing songs with some fella named Lamont Dozier and Brian Holland. It was Holland Dozier Gorman before it became Holland Dozier Holland. And Fred had pulled me into that mix, tried to get me to write songs with them, but I said, hey, man, you guys ain't making no money, really. But Fred was one of the writers on the song Please Mr. Postman that the Marvelettes did, and eventually recorded by the Beatles, the Carpenters, and I think Pat Boone also did it. So the money started coming in for Fred. And that continued for a while, and then Lamont and his partners, they left Motown and started their own record label. And but before they had done that, Lamont had put together a recording group, a group called the Originals. And Freddie started singing with the Originals, and they had a release that really didn't do a lot for them. And after Holland Dozier left, Marvin Gaye produced on the Originals, and he produced some songs, and eventually their record that catapulted them to that level in which they wanted to become. A song called Baby I'm For Real in the Bells. Yeah. And it was then Fred asked me to come work as a road manager for the group, and I said, well, cool, man. Yeah, you know, Marvin was my man. I had met Marvin through Freddie. The three of us had bonded because all three of us were Aryans, and it was during that period of time when the first thing out of your mouth was, what's your sign? So we bonded under that factor that we were all Aryans. And so I said, great, you know, I started traveling with the guys and got very close to Marvin. He had even asked me to move in with him before his What's Going On album broke. And I thought about it, but I'm happy I didn't, because I really believe that had I done it, my life would have possibly ended as Marvin did. I would have picked that pipe up as he did. I'm sure. But so I went on, and the Originals, they toured, and I had a son, my youngest son, my oldest son. I hadn't been around him, so this is my youngest son. I'd gotten very comfortable being that dad. And then their careers came to a halt artistically, and Lamont had left his partners. He moved out to California, as had Motown and Marvin Gaye. Everyone was moved out to California. And Lamont wrote and produced an album on the Originals, and asked these guys to come on out there. I did when they went out there, and then Fred called me and asked me, he said, well, man, why don't you come on, move out here with us? You can stay with Lamont and become both Lamont's road manager and their road manager. And this was in about 73, I think it was 74. And Lamont was extremely big in Hollywood at that time, and Motown was super big also. So it sounded good to me. I said, well, maybe I can see Evelyn again. And as it was, yeah, I moved out there, and it was just what I thought it was going to be. Lamont was great. I was working more with him than the Originals. and he was writing movie scores, TV scores. I mean, he produced albums on Aretha Franklin, 5 other artists, and I was in the studio with him, really enjoying all of the advantages and perks of being involved with Lamont Dozier at that time. But again, it was something that was pulling me back to Detroit, and that was my youngest son. I had him out to California that summer for his 5th birthday, and I thought his mother was going to let him stay out there with me, but she opted on bringing my baby back. So I did. I brought him back reluctantly, and I continued there for a while. But then it got to the point where I said, "Well, man, I got to go back. I didn't want my son to grow up as I did, fatherless. So I left the guys reluctantly, and I said, man, I'm going back to my son, and I came back here and got involved in television production and doing some things. And then I went back to the post office. This is in 1982. I sustained an injury that necessitated me staying there. I was going to go back out to California because a friend had some businesses I was going to get involved in, but like I said, I had to end up staying there. And the original careers came to a skid, and Fred ended up going back to the post office also as a letter carrier in California. And one day when he was delivering mail, he went to deposit the mail in the box, and the guy came out, and the song "Please Mr. Postman" was playing. And he told Fred, he said, I know you wish you'd have wrote that song. He said, well, I did. He said, yeah. So when he called, he told me about it. I said, well, man, what you do is write was the Postal Records, which was a magazine that was published and distributed throughout the post office to the employees, sharing the highlights and events. And he shared that story, and they printed and wrote about the incident. And then People magazine picked it up and did a feature on it. And it led to Regis Philbin's show, Calling Fred, and he went out and did that interview. And then he became a celebrity within the post office there in California. And they took him out the streets and gave him a cushy job training folks, and also being a part of other activities at the post office. And Fred and I both, we did that before we eventually did retire. I retired in '94, and he retired shortly thereafter. And it was always a regret of mine that I never sang again. And Fred and I, one thing that I do appreciate about the journey that I was on, I did sit down and with Fred and did co-write a song that the originals recorded. It was called Endlessly. And I wish I had it to play for you, but I thought I would. I don't have it. But in reflecting, and Fred and I stayed close because he was my brother, and I would often visit and spend time there in California with him. And we did that for the years up until the time when Fred died in June of 2006. And after reflecting on the times that I spent with my boy Fred, it's caused me to look back and reflect on all of these folks that I spoke about that had such a profound impact in my life musically that has led me to the point to where I am now. And I would just like to take this time to thank those guys, Will Davis, Andrew Harkness, Oliver Green, and my singing partner buddies, John Middleton, Capawa, Marvin Gaye. And, but most of all, I'd just like to thank Clifton Richardson, who got me back in singing for the last time in my life. It's been over 50 years, and I'm 76 years old now. So what I'd just like to do, I would just like to do a little bit to honor Cliff by singing Dream Girl in memory of Cliff, and Evelyn, my dream girl. Dream girl, I love you so. Dream Dream girl, I love you so. My heart is yours. It's my girl, Evelyn. Yeah, thank you.